Wonder Woman. Wednesday.
My friends, we are back with yet another edition of Wonder Woman Wednesdays, a podcast in which we break down an episode of the classic Wonder Woman TV show starring the one and only Lynda Carter. I'm your host, Stan the Man, and each episode I share the mic with a Wonder Woman cosplayer. If you're listening at press time, December 2023, we're approaching the holidays, so I hope you have a joyous season. So I'm sending you some love. And if you're listening at another time, I'm sending you even more love because we all need it. Today's episode will be breaking down Season 1, Episode 9, The Last of the $2 Bills. My guest is my wonderful friend, Susan Sistare. Pronounce it right, pal. Sistare. Is she a Wonder Woman cosplayer? Possibly. Is she a Wonder Woman herself? Definitely. Does she know Corey Feldman? You're going to have to listen and find out right here, right now on Wonder Woman Wednesdays. An elusive spy plots to undermine the U.S. economy with a plan involving doppelgangers, explosives, and a tricky mustache. Will Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman foil his plan, or have they seen the last of the $2 bills? That's it. That's the episode. The last of the $2 bills, I say again. I am talking to my friend, Susan. How's it going, Susan?
Hey, Stan. It's going great.
Yeah. All right. So before we get into the episode, and we will, why don't you just give us a brief description of who the heck you are?
I'm your friend.
Yay! And should I be calling you Susan Amanda? Or what name do you want to use in this?
Well, in professional realms, I go by Susan sis-star.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
I'm a star, not a stair. I hate when people say sis-stair, but it does kind of look like it's pronounced like that.
Okay.
It is sis-star.
Susan sis-star.
So yes, Stan, you can call me whatever you like.
Yay! And so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, what do you want to know?
Gosh, there's so much. Well, first of all, what is your Wonder Woman connection?
Why am I here?
Yeah, you may or may not be an actual cosplayer, but you have cosplayed Wonder Woman in a way.
Well, I am not officially a cosplayer, and so therefore I feel terribly I'm overwhelmed that you would want me to be on this podcast because
yes.
I'm not qualified.
But when people hear your resume of the kinds of Wonder Woman type stuff you do, they may.
I guess I sort of do.
Yeah.
Sure. So it's been a moment. I'm getting ready to reveal something about myself that even you don't know, Stan.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
A podcast exclusive.
So I've done a few bodybuilding shows in the past. The last one I did, I was Wonder Woman.
Yes.
For my bodybuilding show. And by that, I mean, so what happens in these cases, it's called the Carolina Supernatural. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's a Spartanburg, South Carolina show. It's a natural show, meaning there are no steroids, because if you place, I believe it's first or second, it might be third, I've forgotten now. They do test you for steroid use.
Okay.
So, you don't get people as big as Schwarzenegger up there. This is all chemical free.
Right.
Or supposedly. It is, because they're going to know if
they're going to know. They'll find out
any kind of enhancers. Yeah.
They don't have a lasso of truth, but they have waves.
They don't. Oh, we're going to talk about that because I have some questions for you about that lasso. Oh,
okay.
Okay. Anyway, so I was Wonder Woman in the last show I did a number of years ago, and I had a very skimpy suit, as you have to have, because the judges have to see all of your stuff.
Right. All your musculature.
So Lynda Carter was very conservatively dressed compared to Susan Sistare a few years ago. But I had, my suit was blue, and I had little glitter stars that I affixed, to the bottom part of it. And
you made it or you modified it?
I modified it.
Okay.
Yes. And I had the tiara. I didn't do the boots because you really kind of have to be barefoot.
Right.
And I
right.
didn't have a lasso. I did have the wrist cuffs.
Oh, cool.
It was, well, I think I sent you a picture.
Yeah. I think we're using that as the promo picture, if that's okay.
Oh boy.
Well, we can talk about that. We don't have to.
We can, because both of my
you.
parents are now have now passed on, so I can talk about this now.
Okay,
But they were not happy.
Really?
Oh no, because at the time I was in my late 30s and my mother was very conservative, and she was just like, I can't believe that you would get up in front of all these people looking like that, because the suit is is even more revealing than a bikini. Like it's almost like strings.
Right. Well, because,
and then you have to bounce around, you have to show all your musculature and stuff in the first part of the show. And then the last half of the show, everybody does a 90-second routine.
Mm-hmm.
And you know me, I'm a theater person, which is how we met.
That's right.
So going back to your whole, who are you? I met you in 2017 doing Spamalot.
That's right. I was King Arthur.
You were, and you will always be the king to
Yay!
me. Fun times. Those were good times. Where was I going with that?
You were talking about this crazy outfit that showed off all your muscles.
I had a point, though. Gosh, I'm probably going to say that about 3 or 4 times. Well, I'll go off on a tangent. I'm very sorry.
That is okay, because what we can do is we can just go into the episode, and then we'll talk more later about bodybuilding. We can talk about the fact that you're an author. We can talk about the fact that you're a veteran. We've already talked a little bit about your acting, but
okay, so you preemptively forgive me for being in the middle of something and going, oh, I remember what I was going to say 30 minutes ago.
That makes for the best podcast. If you just like switch tracks, right? Whenever.
Yes, all of a sudden, audience loves that.
Yeah. I just, leave them wanting more. We'll interrupt ourselves several times.
So in terms of how I'm qualified to do this podcast, I'm really not. I just dressed as Wonder Woman for that show. And I did so the 90-second routine is, whatever music you want to do. And I did my routine to the theme song. Oh, and you just mentioned that I am a veteran. Yes. And all veterans know that there's something called BCGs. Okay. Have you heard of the term BCGs?
No, I have not.
Okay. So when you go to boot camp, if you are visually impaired in any way, they use what's called birth control glasses.
Yes. My brother was in the Air Force. He had those. He never used the acronym, but okay. I get it.
Yes. So I wore my BCGs, which are not as cool as the glasses that Linda Carter wore, because those glasses were cool.
Yeah.
Mine, not as cool, but it sufficed. Mm-hmm. And then I had the tiara and stuff, and I had a cape, not as cool as the cape that she wears in this episode.
Right.
The one that looks like a tent.
It's glorious.
It's so big. It is glorious. It's
head to toe.
I want that. Okay, here we go. This is what I was going to tell you that is going to be news to you.
Okay.
I will be 50 this year.
Ooh.
And I think I want to do the bodybuilding show again next year. I'm sort of preparing for it. I've been a total gym rat for a while now. And I might want to do Wonder Woman again. I'm not sure if I want to.
Oh, I think.
But anyway, but if I do, I might do the Wonder Woman thing again, only because the theme song is like, and there may be different versions of it. I'm not sure, but the one that I'm familiar with is like right at 90 seconds. I didn't have to do any cutting or anything. So it was easy just to record it, plug it in.
That's really interesting. I used to listen to TV theme songs in the 80s, and every one of them was 60 seconds long. So
wow.
It's very probable that the theme song was either 60 or 90 seconds or 2 minutes, like whatever, like to keep it at a at a reasonable sort of,
Yeah.
a
Right at
predictable interval.
right at 90. And I did the whole, I'll show you my video one day. I did the whole whipping off of the glasses
Nice.
and I did the twirl. And then of course, then you have to do the stuff. You have
Yeah,
to do the
yeah.
flexing.
That you just flex. We this is an audio podcast, so she was just flexing there. All right.
Y'all missed it.
Yeah. We'll send them pictures later. All right, so we'll get back to that. There will be more exciting talk, but we're going to talk about this crazy episode, the last of the $2 bills.
Yeah.
Are you ready? Now you told me that you watched this more than once. Is that right? Or at least once?
I have. I may be missing a few details because I had to watch it on YouTube. I can get into HBO Max, right? But they only go up to episode 3 in the first season.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I should have explained that to you. So there's this weird thing in HBO Max where the first 3 episodes are during one season because they were kind of special events. Mm-hmm. And then they start again in the following fall. And in IMDb, that's all considered one season. But on HBO Max, those first 3 episodes are considered the first season. And then what we normally think of as season 1, episode 4, 5, and so on, they call the second season. So the episode was there, but it wasn't there by the episode number that I gave you.
Stan,
I'm sorry.
You could have told me that.
I forgot. I'm so sorry. But anyway, but you watched the YouTube.
I did find it on YouTube. It took me some time.
Uh-huh.
I had to do a deep dive, so I may be missing a few things.
Well, we can cover those.
But I think I'm
things.
well prepared. I'm showing you my notebook.
Wow, you've got notes. I've got notes too.
I did. Well, I know you do. I did a little research on not just the episode, but about the whole $2 bill thing.
Really?
So I thought you might like what I found.
I would love to hear what you found about $2 bills. Let's talk about $2 bills, like the actual factual $2 bills. Tell me about them.
Okay. So a couple things. And I have been a teacher for 18 years.
That's right. You're a teacher too.
Yes. And I've gone over some stuff with my students before. I've taught elementary and high school. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how much they don't know. Just like me. I did not know this. I always thought this is so our audience are billions of people listening to this.
In the billions at least.
Will know. I always thought the US Mint was responsible for all of the production of money in our nation. Mm-hmm. That is not true. Did you know that? The Mint is responsible for coins. It is the BEP, or the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, that does our print money. And they mention that in this episode.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the BEP.
Okay. The BEP.
So the first $2 bill came out in 1775.
No kidding.
No kidding. It gets better. Wait for it. So I looked up, and this was the last stats I found were from 2019. And I'll just go through this really quickly because this does relate to our episode, I promise.
Okay.
So the $1 bill, this is a 2019 stat here. The $1 bill, the 20, the 50, and the 100 basically have stayed the same amount of production. Mm-hmm. Okay. The $2 bill and the $10 bill have not. The $10 has decreased dramatically. I'm not really sure why. In 2015, I made this little note. There were about 300 million $10 bills produced by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Now, sorry, no, let me take that back. 300 million now. In 2015, it was over 620 million. So I don't know why that's decreased, but the $2 bill was produced in 2015, roughly around 32 million of them. Now we're at 160 million. I'm really not sure why that is, but But yes, $2 bills are circulating more. I used to get them. Here's a little fun fact before we dive into this episode.
Yeah.
I used to get them from my grandmother
Mm-hmm.
as little gifts, birthday and whatever. But she abruptly stopped giving them to me.
Is it because you wore a bikini?
No, because she passed before she could see me in that and promptly have a heart attack. This was right before that. She had told my mother, I'm not going to give these to her anymore because I hear that strippers use them. Which is so funny because it's like, first of all, did you think that I was stripping? And secondly, if I were stripping, I would already be getting a lot. Maybe she thought I was or something, and I was getting them from people. I don't know. But she evidently had a big problem with that. So ixnay on the $2 ills bay. So anyway, little research on the $2 bill. But yes, it is in circulation.
Yeah.
You don't see it a whole lot, but it's funny. I'm going to just dive into something that Steve said in the episode about how they stopped making them.
Yeah.
Well, they never did. So that is factually inaccurate, as are lots of other things in this episode. But I'll let you go into that.
Okay.
You're the master of
well, I don't know much
stuff.
I don't know much about facts. I'll tell you that. I know I know about the episode. Well, we can talk about that, but you can point out where they are factually incorrect.
I'll try.
Okay. So the first thing that comes up in the episode is the credits. And so we see that the director is Stuart Margolin. I think I'm saying that right. It might be Margolin, but I don't know if you recognize that name. But this guy, Stuart Margolin, he's an actor, and he was in the Rockford Files for years as Angel Martin, and he's also in a bunch of Love American Styles. Did you ever see Love American Style? It's the goofiest early 70s, late 60s thing you've ever seen.
Yes, but I can't just pull a fact out of my butt about it.
you don't have to.
I was pretty young, but I do remember Rockford Files. I was just kind of smiling to myself because I remember the theme song. Do you remember the theme song?
Wait, is that right? Yeah. Okay. So, but also, and here's like one of my quirks. Anytime that anybody related to MASH, which is, I'm going to say my favorite show, even though we're talking about Wonder Woman.
I know it is.
I'm going to say something about it. And he was in 2 episodes of MASH. And in both episodes, he played kind of a creepy guy, but he seems like a nice guy. So he was in the episodes Bananas, Crackers, and Nuts and Operation Nose Lift, which was the first 2 seasons of MASH. So, but he's a director, which I didn't know. Oh, and another thing, he's still working. Like he had a movie come out this year. It's a short film, but it came out in 2023. So he's still out there doing the thing.
Bananas, Crackers, and Nuts, huh?
Well, he played a psychiatrist in that one.
I thought that episode was about most of my ex-boyfriends. I could be wrong.
You could be wrong. So he directed this, and it's interesting because I had some both good and bad reactions to some of the directing moments. Like I think they were choices that he made as the director, but it's hard to say. Also, it was written by Paul Dubov and Gwen Bogny, Bagni. Bogny, I think is how you say it. And they're a married couple they were also a writing team. But here's something interesting about this Gwen Bogny. She is listed in the IMDb as having 3 husbands, including this Paul Dubov. All of them passed away. And I don't know if there's something suspicious there, but she was...
Sounds like a Dateline episode to me.
Yes. And so husband number 4, wherever you are, be careful.
Be warned.
All right. So the episode starts at sea, and there's some glorious B-roll. I'm confident that it wasn't shot for this episode. I don't know where they got this footage. There's a ship called the the Haynes, I don't know if I don't think they're being pursued by the submarine. They discovered a submarine and they're dropping charges on it. And now, so you were in the military. Do you have anything to say about this particular footage, since we're talking about facts and non-facts?
Well, I wasn't in the Navy. I was in the Air Force, but I do have a couple of comments coming up, but not about the Chesapeake Bay versus Atlantic Ocean thing. I'm
okay.
ambivalent about that.
I was gonna look it up. Where is Chesapeake Bay? Is it off of Massachusetts?
No, it's off basically Virginia. I mean, technically, I guess it is part of the Atlantic Ocean, but it's a bay. Like, it is a bay, and they would have to have tried very hard to get into that bay, I feel like.
Well, they did say that it was near Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
I think they said that. So,
well, and when they open, it's looking at the submarine. It's really hard to fathom how they could get that submarine into those waters, because it only looks like about 50 feet deep.
Yeah, it looks really shallow.
If that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird things going on in this episode.
Okay. So with keeping in mind that it's fairly dubious, this submarine is skating along in this really shallow water. They drop some charges. They think they destroyed the submarine, and you can tell because there's a bubbling crude coming up. Some oil just kind of bubbles up to the surface. So they're like, "Oh, we got it. Sound the alarm. We're done." And but obviously that's a ruse, and we find that out when we go to the War Department office, where Diane, Steve, and the general are there. And the general, talks about this. He talks about this super spy, this spy named Wotan, which is spelled with a W, but because he's German, they say it with a V. I
was wondering about that. Yes.
Yeah, I had to watch with captions, and that comes up later. But I had to watch the captions because I wasn't understanding the name and that they were throwing around. So yes, it's Wotan. It's spelled Wotan, but they say Wotan because it's German. It's supposed to be like the god of war, which is another thing I meant to look up and totally didn't. I'm sorry. But anyway,
let's trust Diana, because she was the one who was like, "Oh, that's the German god of war."
That's right, and
we're going to trust Diana.
Oh yeah, I totally. And she also mentions, and here's the first of many instances where she probably knows what's going on, and the men in the room don't, and so she's going to help them figure it out so that they can feel like they're that's their idea.
Steve is a bit unaware and hapless sometimes.
Yeah, poor Steve. He runs into a lot of trouble in this episode, and Wonder Woman helps him out. So she suggests, she mentions that she just got word that this submarine was possibly taken care of right outside of Chesapeake Bay, and they're like, "Hey, maybe that's Wotan, so I better go check it out." So Steve goes to check out this potentially dangerous situation with no backup, just Diana, which unbeknownst to him, that is the best backup you can have. But I don't know, thinking that he's just bringing his assistant, I'm not sure that's great planning. But maybe
are you referring to the scene where there's a raft coming in? Yes. And they're hiding in the cliffs.
In the rock. They're in the rocks. It's Steve and Diana, his assistant. And I guess if they're just going to do reconnaissance, that's okay. But Steve immediately, he's like, "I'm going to go into action." So he sends Diana back to phone this into the general so he can send some more people.
Okay, but before he does, there is a fourth guy up on top of that cliff. Where the hell did this guy come from? But he's up there, and I can't recall exactly what was said before this, but I wrote this down because I thought this was so funny. Steve says something inane about, "I'll take all these three guys. You go back to headquarters," or something. And she says, I wrote this down, I think that's a brilliant piece of deductive reasoning. And to me, in 2023, I
Mhm.
can look back on something like that and think she's totally being condescending as Wonder Woman. But at the time, it was probably perceived as her just being very feminine and, oh, you're right, Steve, you're the man.
Well,
Because she says it in a very girly voice
sure. But here's the thing.
that's attractive.
Well,
It's, oh,
it comes up later that she
okay.
is in love with him. I mean, it becomes apparent. I mean, if you've been watching the series, you know that she's in love with him. And there's a scene later where it's very obvious. So I mean, I take it as her being supportive. Number one, I don't think that Wonder Woman or Diana, as we know them, would be condescending unless she were talking to an evil person. She is condescending to the evil. You look skeptical. You think maybe she's condescending
Well,
just
if
a
I
little
look
bit.
skeptical, it's only because I was just thinking, is she really in love with him? As Diana, yes, I can believe that. But as Wonder Woman, is she? I don't
Well,
know.
you know
You know
what?
more about it than I do because you've watched the majority of these, I'm guessing, as an adult. Most of this series I watched as a kid, and of course, didn't really get any of it,
Right.
except that I just knew I loved this woman because she was so powerful. And, as a little girl growing up in South Carolina in the late 70s, early 80s, we didn't have a lot of uh, people like that to look up to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, having
Well,
said that, do you think that Diana's in love with him, or Wonder Woman is in love with him, or both?
well, I think they don't make it absolutely crystal clear ever,
True.
because I was actually surprised that in this episode they were so obvious about her, and it may have been, it may have been motherly affection. There's I'll just say the scene that comes up later, he's sleeping at his desk and she comes up to him as Diana, and she sort of crouches next to him and looks at him sleeping and takes off her glasses and sort of brushes her fingers through his hair and puts her hand on his arm, and then he's
Like I do to you
yeah,
every time we go get a beer.
every time. and and he starts to wake up and she's kind of like, she puts her glasses back on and pretends it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So who knows what that means? It seems like, they're saying, gosh, she's in love with him but she's never going to tell him, or she feels such great affection for him and can't quite put a finger on what it is or means, or she's in love with him but she will uh never do anything about it because she's a demigoddess and he's a human.
Mhm.
So, who knows? But in any case, I think when she says these goofy, girly things sometimes, I think one, it's a product of the times, but also I think she's just trying to build him up and be supportive, because she
Sure.
feeds him so much information in this episode. It's apparent that she wants him to feel like he's figuring things out and, doing the best he can.
It's almost a little bit of pity there. Like, oh, like patting his head. You're such a man. You'll learn.
Yeah. Well, that's possible because the first thing that she does when she runs off is turn into Wonder Woman. Like, it's
Sure.
that obvious that he's going to need some help.
Yeah.
Like, he clearly doesn't have the situation handled like he would hope that he does. So yeah, she turns into Wonder Woman and he goes after these folks in the raft. One of them who is, in a black mask. So that must be Votan. And yeah, this guy on the cliff yells and says, Votan, look out, or whatever. He warns him. And so there's a little skirmish, and uh, Wonder Woman gets to Votan, and Steve goes to get the other two guys in the raft, right? And
Mhm.
when Wonder Woman grabs Votan, she looks at his eyes. And there's this weird thing that I think the director does where they look at each other and there's like a sound effect. Like, and I thought, what is he hypnotizing her? What's going on? And because I thought maybe he's got this special power of hypnosis or something, but it doesn't turn out to be that. It's just the director's just pointing out that she's like looking into his eyes because she recognizes his eyes later.
Well, yeah. And once I finished the episode, I thought about that. And I thought to myself, this is maybe just my interpretation of everything. That they did that scene to show that she is, yes, a goddess, but she's also flawed because she looked in his eyes, but yet later on in the episode, and I know we'll get to that, she still didn't fully recognize that's who it was.
Right.
So, and this is why I like certain superheroes that have a flaw.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
Spider-Man kind of comes to mind right off the bat, but there are others. But yeah, she looks in his eyes and she kind of tucks that away in her brain, like, okay, this is what they look like. But later on, she didn't really recognize that. But the thing about that scene that really grinds my gears is that she's kind of holding his arms like, I can't defeat him. But later on, you see her, take this gun and like,
right.
Twist it in half and then a lock later on, but she can't defeat Wotan.
Well, yeah, it is evident that her powers seem to fluctuate depending on the storytelling needs in the show.
Depending on the director.
Depending on the director. And I think, I guess, looking for reasons, maybe when she looks into his eyes, she's distracted by what she sees. And again, that's never explained. And it's probably, I'm just taking a shot in the dark to give her a reason for suddenly not being able to arm wrestle a regular guy. And that's, that he's got some kind of like, maybe the guy's just pure evil. And maybe she's a little bit taken aback when she looks into his eyes and sees that.
It makes me wonder if the director and producers or whoever the powers that be at the time thought to themselves, let's make her a little bit more feminine and I don't want to say weak. She's obviously not weak, but tone it down a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Because, that was what, 77, I think that episode was, which was not terribly long after the original Star Trek. And I don't know if you know this little tidbit of information, the original Star Trek, they were going to have a female captain. And the audiences at the time were just like, hell no. Like, what is this? This is a woman can't be in that position. What are you thinking? And so, they've totally rerouted there. So, we're talking probably not even 10 years later when this was going on. So I don't know, maybe they had to put in those moments where they're like, she's super strong and this amazing goddess, but let's make her, let's polka dot the series with her moments of femininity and I don't want to use the word weakness, but what's another word? Help me out, Stan.
Well, I would say one of her great strengths and one of her Achilles' heels is her kindness. That she gives people.
I can dig that.
Yeah, and
I've got a little bit of that going on in myself, which is why I love her so much.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So you understand, and the thing is, I think she approaches each person that she does battle with, kind of holding back and waiting to see if they'll acquiesce or what they'll do, because she can always ramp it up. And I think she gives everybody the benefit of the doubt and comes in a little more gently than, just powerhouse knocking them flat.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that.
They needed to show her with a softer side in order to keep the audience and make her believable
Yeah.
at the time. Yes.
All right. So we've figured it out.
We did.
So in the meantime, so Steve goes after these fellas in the raft, and they've got a gun. And Steve, I don't know if he even bothered to bring one. I don't know what he was thinking. But anyway, they've got the drop on him. And so Wonder Woman has to leave Wotan to run and help Steve. And that's how Wotan gets away.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then she takes care of the guys in the raft.
And I also wondered, how did he get way up there ahead of the other three guys?
I don't know.
That was just one of my thoughts. We'll never know.
Well, that's another thing I was going to say about the directing. Some of the logistics about where things happen, like they're in one location and then suddenly they're somewhere else. And some of these fights, like somebody just gets pushed off screen and that's
right.
it. So I think Stuart Margolin, sorry, either he, just overlooked a few things, or maybe something's got lost in the editing, which is also possible.
This was another thought I had, that when Steve jumped off that place on the cliff, he didn't get hurt and his hat didn't seem to fall off.
No. Well,
It's just something I thought about.
He's inherently handsome, and his hat is part of that. Okay, so there is one thing I wanted to say about the caption at the beginning of the show, which I forgot to mention. So the graphic says, it reminds us that it's 1942, which is, that right there is World War II. And so the show was in late 76, I believe. And that was 34 years after the war. Now, our discussion in 2023, we're talking about a show from 76, and that was 47 years ago. So the show was a longer time ago to us than the war was to the people that made the show. That seemed more interesting in my head before I said it out loud. All right. So
that is interesting, though.
Yeah. And, because you think, like in the 70s, they were talking about World War II. That was like so long ago. But to us, the 70s, which I remember well, maybe not that well, but I remember it. It was a longer time ago.
Well, yeah. Once you get to be our age, you and I are probably close.
Yeah.
Then 37 years doesn't seem like terribly long.
It zips right by gosh.
It does.
So just very quickly, so the guy playing Wotan is James Olsen, and we probably remember him from the Andromeda Strain. Did you ever see that movie? That's what I remember him from.
No, I didn't, but I am familiar with it because my brother's a big fan of that movie.
It's a good movie. It's really interesting, though, because it's so slow. Like, it's slow and methodical. Like, it's not slow, boring, unless you happen to get bored by how slow it is. but it's a very interesting, deliberately paced movie. I'll say that. But this guy, James Olsen, was also on a million TV shows, playing guest walk-ons like this character, like Hawaii Five-0 and Bionic Woman, and just all those shows in the 70s. So he looks very familiar to just about anybody. Now, during this first fight, that was also the first time in the episode we see the great Wonder Woman spin, right?
Mm-hmm.
She turns into Wonder Woman. Fantastic. And also, there was a fence where they were, and probably no reason for it to be there other than for Wonder Woman to have something to jump over, which is nice to have so she can do the jump. She did some great stunts in this episode, and the jump, was not, one of the top stunts, but it was pretty good. Okay, so that's it for the first scene, right? So Wotan gets away. They get, they were able to subdue these other two guys in the boat, so they don't know what he's up to yet. He's on the loose, right? And so the next scene, you see him. He's a photographer outside of a diner somewhere in Washington, D.C., right?
Right.
And so So Diana and the General Secretary, Etta Candy. Are you familiar with Etta?
Oh yeah, I wrote some notes about Etta.
Okay. This is a good episode for her. She has a lot of fun stuff that she says. And so as soon as they come up to Wotan as photographer, he says, "Ooh, a whack and a wave." And even the captions, like a lot of people don't know exactly what that is. I do because I've watched a couple of military shows like MASH, and and the captions even got it wrong. Like they spelled it WACK. Like, what is he even saying? What are you talking about? So why don't you, veteran in the room, tell us what a whack and a wave are?
I don't know the wave part. That is foreign to me, but I know the wax, that's the Women's Army Corps.
Right. And the wave is the Navy version of that. It's the
Okay.
women accepted for volunteer emergency services.
I just learned something.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
I mean, I
A
think
whack and a wave. Wow.
I think they made up the wave acronym after the whack. They wanted it to sound similar. That's just my theory. I don't know. I don't know what the Navy's up to. But there's also one. There's also one for the Airborne Division, Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron, WAFs.
I have heard of that. Yeah, that was considerably before my time in the military. So yeah, but I do know the wax.
Yeah,
for sure.
So that's what Wotan is referring to when he says, "Hey, a whack and a wave," and so he takes their picture, and then Edda's like, "Ooh, I'll give you some money and give me 3 copies," and he's like, "Great," and
he stipped her.
Yeah, we find out later she never got those pictures, man.
I know, and the quote that I wrote was how when she confronted him, and all this is going on, all the Nazi stuff is going on, and she says, "He and his friends still owe me $1.50." And she's so concerned with that.
I know, she's so mad. Like in the middle of this interrogation, she's just like, "You owe me $1.50."
But you know what? As El Cheapo, because I am the most frugal person on the planet, I felt her pain.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Edda is not to be underestimated. So now
but can I say one thing really quick though about just this is a veteran thing.
Yes.
It kills me to see any kind of military related stuff, TV shows or movies, where they don't take their hats off when they're indoors, because that's a big thing. You take your hat off as you walk in the door of an establishment. If you have a roof over your head, you are not to be wearing a hat. Wow. And they screw it up all the time. There's movies, I can't even tell you how many movies I've seen where they do that. And I just feel like somebody's not doing their homework. That's a pretty basic thing in the service. I'm
laying this on Stuart Margolin.
Yeah.
The director. Stuart. All right. So the reason that Wotan is taking pictures of people, because he's like taking random pictures of people. We find out later he's collecting images so he can plant some spies. He's going to give people plastic surgery to look like these Americans. And this is like a really, by the way, freaking elaborate scheme.
I know, because that was my next note is, did the Nazis seriously make 2 lookalikes based on the pictures that Wotan took in that short of time?
Right. Unbelievable. So anyway, so the subjects, that becomes very quickly apparent is this couple that come out of the diner, and it's Hank Miller and Maggie Robbins. And Maggie Robbins runs the diner. At first I thought she was a waitress, but then she says she owns it. So she runs the place, right? But she kind of dresses like a waitress. Right. But I guess that's just, because that's customer service, right? But her fiance, they're all lovey-dovey. And he works across the street at the Bureau of Engraving. And what was the other thing you said? A Bureau of Engraving and
printing?
And right? Printing. Yes. Where they make the money. Including
the paper money.
Including $2 bills. So so anyway, so this Hank Miller's played by David Cryer, who's a stage actor. His IMDb credits are a little spare, so I thought, oh well, he wasn't very, wasn't very active. But then I saw more information on him, and he's a big theater guy, so he did a lot of theater stuff. And Maggie Robbins is played by Barbara Anderson, who was a regular on Ironside and Mission Impossible, and she did an appearance on the show you mentioned before, Star Trek. She was an actor's daughter who winds up, more complicated than she seems. So anyway, so they're the couple, right? Wotan gets pictures of them, and he goes back to Germany, and he's like, he's looking at these pictures, and he's looking at these people in his office, and he singles out two people that seem to look similar. And of course, they look similar because they're the same actors with just a little bit of makeup on.
Nuh-uh.
Really? For sure. I bet money on it. So the guy who's going to do the plastic surgery, Dr. Dietrich, is played by John Howard, who was in 7 Bulldog Drummond movies in the late 30s. Who knew? Also in the Philadelphia Story and The Invisible Woman. He did a lot of those old-timey crazy movies. And the Colonel in the room, Michael Dan Wagner. I'm mentioning him because he was a judge in the show After MASH, which is not MASH, but it's After MASH. Do you know After MASH?
I'm afraid I don't.
It was an attempt at a spinoff. It unfortunately didn't go as planned, but yeah, Colonel Potter and William Christopher and some of the folks from MASH were in that, but it didn't really take off. But this guy played a judge in that, so maybe it was his fault. I don't know. So they select their people who are going to be doppelgangers, right? And in the meantime, we get a scene with Etta talking to Diana about how mad she is that she has not gotten her pictures yet.
Over that ding dang picture.
So yeah, she's like, she's got a fire under her, and she's gonna go and find that guy, right? So her and Diana go, and they they have a receipt, right? And so they find this Photoshop or whatever it is, this store with they develop photos and stuff, and there's this guy in there running the place, and Diana recognizes him. He was the guy on the beach, on the cliff that warned Wotan. So she's suspicious immediately, right? And so Etta gives him a piece of her mind, right? And
$1.50.
And they leave the shop, and Diana's like, I gotta go do something, because she's thinking, I gotta turn into Wonder Woman and shake this guy down. And Etta's like, that's fine, I won't be good company anyway. And she literally like grumbles as she's walking off camera, and you can hear her. So she has her great moment, right? And then we follow Wonder Woman, who goes back to this guy's apartment, and like I guess it's the apartment above the Photoshop. So she goes up there. She finds a little radio, like a ham radio, disguised as a hot plate or something. And then the guy comes in, and I forget exactly how he gets away from her. Oh, because she doesn't attack him. She's just like, listen, I'm going to ask you a few questions.
I just want to ask you some questions. Yeah, she does the girly thing again.
Yeah.
I just want to ask questions.
And so he like makes a run for it. He runs out the window to the fire escape, and she just kind of lets him go because she knows she can catch up with him, right? And so he gets in his truck. She jumps down, another fine stunt, jumps down off the fire escape into the alley, and he tries to ram her with the truck, and she just stops it. Great little, there was a kind of a nice little patang sound when the truck hits her hands, and she just stops it cold, right? So she takes him back upstairs, ties him up, and before she went up there though, she I think she called for Steve. She called the office and had Etta get Steve or something. So Steve comes, Steve and Etta get there, and they've got this guy tied up.
Mhm.
And that's when Etta's like, like they're going to talk to him about Votan and all this Nazi espionage, and she's like, and you owe me a dollar.
$1.50.
So and Steve spies the radio, and he's like, hey, did you change the frequency? This is a Nazi frequency. So anyway, they start talking somehow. Oh, they because they were talking about where the photos were taken. They were like, yeah, it was right across from the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. And so, where they make the money. And Wonder Woman says something wistful about the money, and Steve's like, hey, why don't I show you around this place? And it's like a date. This is one of those things that took me aback, besides Diana looking at her or looking at Steve like she's in love with him. Steve basically asks her on a date. He's like, let me show you around the place, like for no reason, just because he wants to spend some time with her.
Mm-hmm.
He's laying the groundwork, I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
So
that Steve is smooth.
He's one smooth character. All right,
but not as smooth as Thomas Jefferson.
No.
Which I know you're going to talk about next.
It's coming up. But first, Votan, he's in his office, and he like does the sort of bad guy thing where he sort of explains what his evil plan is, right? To everybody in the room. And one of those people happens to be an American spy. So when everybody leaves the room to celebrate this little, because this was the reveal of the plastic surgery. And so now we see that those actors look exactly like the actors who are playing the young couple. How about that? Right? It's crazy. I don't know where they got the actors to look exactly like them, but
it's amazing.
So they go off to celebrate, and the American spy stays back so he can call in this information, like right there in Votan's office. And of course, Votan comes back in. Who knows why? Maybe he forgot his wine glass. I don't know. But he comes back, and this guy's in the middle of like trying to send word to America that this is what Votan's plan is: $2 bills. And then Votan stops him and has him, hauled off.
Yeah, like 2 seconds of Morse code,
right.
and then they get the message, and it's
they don't know
more
what
elaborate
to make of it.
Than that.
it just says Votan $2 bills. Yeah, and that's all. So the general and Steve are like, "What does that mean?" And in the meantime, you see, some time has passed, and Votan and his two plastic surgery people, doppelgangers, parachute into Washington, D.C. quite easily, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the moment then where Diana comes in. It's the next morning. Wow, you sneezed, and I didn't hear a thing, but I saw your camera go fa-voom.
Well, I knew that I can't do a podcast without either a sneeze or a burp. So you got the better of the two.
Nice.
So,
anyway, well, you can burp later if you want. So anyway, so it's the next morning. Steve is sleeping at his desk. Diana comes in. She sees him, and she walks over to him quietly. She kneels down next to him, takes off her glasses, looks at him like he's the most beautiful hunk of man in the world.
He might be.
He could be. I mean, Lyle Wagner he's up there. And, she like brushes his hair with her hand and puts her hand on his arm. And then he stirs a little bit. And then before she stops what she's doing, she looks off. There's this look like this is never going to work, or there's so much trouble on the horizon. I don't know. It's like a troubled look, like she was looking at him in love, and then she looked away. And I'd love to know exactly what that was about. I'd like to think that it's about their doomed relationship because they never get together. Spoiler alert, they never get together. I know you're sad about it.
I am sad. That kind of makes me want to shed a tear.
Well, maybe things happen off camera that weren't in the show. You don't
We
know.
can only hope.
We can only hope. There is, I will tell you, after this first season, there's a jump forward in time where she has gone back to Paradise Island for like 37 years, I believe, because then when the show comes back, it's in present day. And so Steve is unfortunately passed away. But his son or his grandson, I think it's his son. I don't know how the math works, but anyway, it's a new Steve Trevor, but it's not somebody that she's in love with because it's like the son or the grandson of the man she was in love with. So,
Sure.
So there's no more romance for the rest of the series after that. Sadly. Anyway, so
what are your thoughts on this whole Thomas Jefferson thing?
Oh, right. Well, okay. I have two thoughts. One is, actually, I only have one thought. The other thought is like, did he really talk to her? I don't think so. So what happens is what she's referring to, if you haven't watched the episode, is that Steve's looking at a $2 bill, right? And he says something about Thomas Jefferson or Tom Jefferson. And she's like, who's that? And he's like,
if only he could speak to us or something like that. And then the next scene is her like looking at the $2 bill going, come on, Mr. Jefferson, come on. It's almost sexual. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, because she does get an idea and she attributes it to him. And she's like, thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
And then she kisses the $2 bill and leaves some sexy lipstick on it.
Right.
So, but here's the thing I noticed, right? So back then they didn't have high definition TVs like I do. And when they do a close up of the $2 bill, it says 1963 series. So it's 1942, but she's got a 1963 $2 bill. And then when they show it again after the lipstick's on it, it's a 1953 $2 bill with a different serial number. So either the props department was not up on their game, or she magically turned it into a younger $2 bill through her kiss.
I would say the former is probably the more likely. There were some budget issues there with not wanting to go back and redo a scene. Just get it out there.
Well, once you got the lipstick on, you can't redo it. So they had two props, one with lipstick and one without.
Right.
So I'm looking at my notes. Okay, so the next scene, they show up for their date. Like Steve, I'm calling it a date. Probably nobody else in the world thinks it's a date, but I do. Because why else did Steve ask her? He wanted to spend some time with her.
Sure.
And when he gets there, she is in her glorious cape. It's like she dressed up, right? Not just her cape, but if you notice, she has a skirt on too. Like when Wonder Woman, when her costume in the first episode first appeared, there was a skirt. There's a kitty behind you.
There is.
For those who can't see, there is a kitty behind Susan.
I have kitties behind me and in front of me in every Zoom meeting I do.
Awesome. It enhances the meeting for sure. So she's wearing this cape. She's wearing this skirt that I don't believe it's appeared since the pilot episode. It's like a removable skirt that
okay.
So she dressed up. She dressed up to meet Steve. It's a date. I'm just gonna say. So
it sounds like Diana is the one who kind of has a thing, but it's transferred over at least a little bit to her persona as Wonder Woman.
Well, the thing is, Steve doesn't love Diana. He loves Wonder Woman. So
he can't love Diana because they're in the military, and that's inappropriate.
Now tell me, we're going to go off on a tangent again here because I haven't really figured this out, but I assume it's because he's with special services. He's with the some intelligence branch, right? I forget what they call it, but he's in the army and she is in the Navy. She's a yeoman in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And she works for him and he's in the army.
I haven't really figured that out either. I think that might have, believe it or not, I don't know everything that there
I don't
is to
believe
know
it. I don't
about,
believe that for a second.
about the military. But I don't know. Maybe working for the War Department, you'll have different people in different branches, but it almost doesn't matter. You're not supposed, I mean, it happens all the time, but you're not really supposed to fraternize.
Okay. Yeah.
In that regard.
Okay.
Especially when you're officers.
Sure.
You know?
Well,
so maybe he just kind of shelved it. Like, yeah, she's beautiful, whatever. But her hair is always pulled back in a bun and she wears glasses. And this is another thing I've always wondered. Does he really not know that that's Wonder Woman? Come on. Come on.
It's one of Steve's biggest shortcomings that he can't figure out that that's Wonder Woman.
Man, that guy's dumb for a freaking officer.
He has ample opportunity to figure it out, and somehow, and maybe it's because he loves her. Maybe that's what blinds him to figuring out who she is.
This show is so much more complex than I thought when I was like 7 years old. Well, I'm learning a lot from you, Stan.
I think there is a lot to this show because there's a lot to this character. And that's, I mean, that goes back to, when the character was written in the comics starting in 1942. Like the character's been around for years before the show. And so there's a lot of good stuff there to draw from. And some of these writers, I think, did their homework. And when they did the pilot, they did their homework. And so, I think that is an advantage that this show has that some other shows don't have. Like Bionic Woman, which is a great show. There was no Bionic Woman comic book before the show. Like she was invented for the show. She was invented for the $6 Million Man show. And so they were just making everything up. But for this show, they have years of, over 3 decades of material to draw from. They don't always take advantage of that because there's a lot that they could do that they don't. And, but that has to do with budget. Even the way the show is now, with no supervillains with actual superpowers, and there were in the comics, even with that, even with her powers toned down so that it's basically, it's more like a human espionage kind of thing. They still felt like being in the 40s was too much of a budget for them to deal with. And that's why after the first season, it becomes a present day thing.
Okay.
I just totally went off on a tangent there and didn't even let you chime in. How's it going?
Do you want me to chime in now with my notes?
Oh my gosh.
My little pad here.
Yes, please do.
So, a couple of things really quick. When I forgot the dude's name now, when they're coming out of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Oh,
Bad Hank? Or is it Good Hank? Hank is
I think it's Bad Hank. And he says, I personally keep them, talking about the engraving plates, I personally keep them under lock and key. And I thought, well, where do you do that? Under your pillow? Or like in the building? I don't know. That kind of didn't make sense. And then the next note that I wrote was, why is this woman crumpling up $2 bill sheets? That was not explained.
Remember, my gosh.
They were in the BEP.
Yeah.
And she's like grabbing them like, I'm so angry these $2 bills did not turn out like I wanted them to.
Well,
and throwing them in the garbage.
That I swear I've seen that before. That whole sequence, because the whole sequence plays like a lot of the footage is borrowed from, some movie that you probably saw in grades that they showed you in grade school
stuff. Yeah.
Like how the printing process works. And I remember scenes where people would take whole sheets and crumple them up and throw them away. But what the narration was, when I saw that original thing in 5th grade or whatever it was they were talking about how if there were any imperfections at all on a sheet, they threw the whole thing away.
Yeah.
They didn't send it to the cutter. They threw the whole sheet away, and that was it. So like all those people are looking for, because theoretically, when you have a piece of currency that has a blemish on it or whatever, a mistake on it, it's suddenly, that piece of currency is suddenly worth more than what it's supposed to be worth. And so they don't want those going out there. So they would rather throw that whole sheet away and print a new one. So that's what that was about.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
I swear that that's the same footage that I saw in the 5th grade or whenever it was that I saw it. Maybe it was high school. I don't know. It all blurs together for me. But anyway, so did you have other notes though?
Only one more, that Dan Fletcher, who was the Secret Service guy, that was his
Yes.
name in the show, looks a lot like George W. Bush. And that is pretty much my last note. Aren't you glad I shared that?
I am, because I didn't have any notes about Dan Fletcher. And so I'm glad you
Go
threw
back
that
and
in
watch
there.
it. He absolutely does. It's everything. The eyes, the smile. Yeah.
All right. So
I know that's totally irrelevant to anything we're talking about right now, but it was just a thought.
but I love that level of detail. And that adds so much to the episode, I think. So so basically, when they finish their little tour, Wonder Woman sort of puts together Wotan's plan, and she says it to Steve again in a way that allows him to think that he's thinking of it.
Yes.
Like
It's like, have you seen, okay, sorry, this is totally irrelevant. My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh yeah.
Where they're like, he's got to make, he's got to feel like this is his plan or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of leading the father of the family into thinking that Tula, his daughter, should go into to college and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, I think Tula should go. And then, of course, the women are like, oh, you're so brilliant. Oh,
Exactly.
that's such a great plan. Oh, my God. And obviously, they planned it all.
Mm-hmm.
They planted the seed. And so it made him think, oh, this is my idea. I feel like that's what Diana does with Steve. She kind of plants these things to where he thinks that he comes up with them on his own. And she's kind of standing back, smiling, like, yeah. I did it again.
Exactly. That is her life. Yes. So once again, Steve has a brilliant idea coming out of nowhere. He has figured out Wotan's plan. And so next we see that Wotan has reappeared as the counterman in this restaurant, this diner. Yeah. Right. And he's got his magical mustache on that he takes on and off throughout the rest of the episode. He's just like zips it off and then he puts it back on. You don't get to see him put it on, but he rips it off like twice on camera, which I don't know why he does that. If it's spirit gum, then I wouldn't. I've had to wear a mustache on stage before I could grow one myself. And I don't recommend.
I've never done that on stage. I don't know what that's like. No, not a mustache. Other things, not a stash.
Well, it's a drag.
I'm sure.
And I would not just rip it off because it's too much trouble to put back on. And, it could hurt if you just rip it off. Anyway, so our Secret Service man, George Bush, goes to the Bureau of Printing and Engraving with Bad Hank. Bad Hank is now, Good Hank has been replaced with Bad Hank. Mm-hmm. And so they go in together. Good Maggie, is it Maggie? I forgot her name already. Yeah, Maggie. Yeah. Good Maggie has been replaced by Bad Maggie, who is now. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention this is a plot point. Earlier, when Good Maggie was Good Maggie, she ran up to Wonder Woman before the date, and asked for her autograph for her brother.
Yes, that was another note I made. is
Oh, yeah.
that good fake out by Wonder Woman getting her to admit, or getting her to see. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. You
Yes,
explain it.
yes, yes. So we know that Wonder Woman gave her an autograph on a menu because that's the first thing that Maggie grabbed,
Uh-huh.
right? So now it's Bad Maggie, and she's working in the diner, and Wotan's in there, acting like he's running the counter, and so Diana comes in, I guess ordering lunch for Steve and the general, and she gives this enormous list of stuff. Like, I need a tuna fish sandwich and I need this and that, and it goes on forever. And so finally they say, Bad Maggie says, okay, that'll be $2. And number one, my first thought was $2 for all that food.
Right.
I'm like, what a deal. And then I thought, and then Diana pays with two singles, and I'm like, why didn't she use a $2 bill? Like, that's the theme of the episode.
Also, it kind of explains, if you get all that for $2, then no wonder Etta was all pissed off about, I want my $1.50, because apparently that was a big thing back
right
then.
I mean, you could buy at least a lunch and a half with that, right? So anyway, so yeah, then Diana sees the autographed menu, and she's like, something's going on here, because, like, Maggie made a big deal out of this autograph. Now it's just sitting here on the counter.
Right.
And there she is. So Wonder Woman, Diana goes and turns into Wonder Woman in the alley. And then she does something weird. She calls Steve and uses the voice of George Bush, right?
Another
and says,
superpower, yeah.
And she's used this superpower before, but my question about it was, how did she know about this? Oh, well, she's Steve's secretary, so of course she knows about the Secret Service guy. So anyway, she uses his voice and says, Steve, something's going on, you got to come down here, come down to the diner, right? And so then she goes back into the diner, and she calls Maggie, who's Bad Maggie, on the autograph thing. First, she like traps her. She's like, I didn't write enough on this autograph. Did you say it was for your sister? and Maggie's like, yeah, my sister. so she says, but before you said it was for your brother. You're not
BS.
Maggie.
Yeah. Yeah, she just nails her at that point. BS, yeah. You're not Maggie.
Yeah. And so Bad Maggie goes for a gun behind the counter, but Wotan grabs Wonder Woman, and he's like, hey man, that's not gonna work. And then I don't know how he convinces her, because he's got no weapons. I guess because he says, I've got the real Maggie and Hank, and I'm gonna hurt them if you do anything, right? So somehow he calms Wonder Woman down, and she's like, why should I believe you? And he says, well, they're right here in the basement, come on down. It's like being really cool and straightforward about it. And so they go down to the basement, and sure enough, good Maggie and good Hank are in a cage, and they're being guarded by Victor Argo, who I totally recognized. I didn't know who I was recognizing, but like, I'm like, this looks like the young version of a guy that I know, right? And so he's been in a million things. He's been in 6 Martin Scorsese movies. Like, Martin Scorsese loves him. He's been in Boxcar Bertha, Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, After Hours, Last Temptation of Christ, and New York Stories. And also, as the IMDb says, he was a good friend of Yoko Ono and Harvey Keitel. And Harvey Keitel is probably how he got to meet Martin Scorsese, but apparently he used to party with Yoko Ono, at least back in the day, back in this wild and wonderful 60s. But anyway, there's this guy that you've seen in just about everything. He's always the bad guy, the heavy. And he's got almost no lines in this, and he's just guarding the little, and I don't know why in the basement of a diner they happen to have a prison cell
Right? I wondered that too.
I mean, that didn't occur to me till just now. I'm like, wait a minute, it's a diner. Why is there a little prison cell in the basement? Maybe it used to be something else. We'll just say that. And we just accept it because
Maybe diners all have cells that we don't know about. Makes you look at diners differently now, doesn't it?
now I'm afraid to go into a diner. Oh my gosh. So one last thing about this scene that I kind of jumped over. To his credit, because I've been giving Stuart Margolin a hard time. He does a wonderful camera angle when Wotan talks Wonder Woman into giving up her bracelets, and when she hands the bracelets, it's almost like a point of view from Wotan. It's not quite, but he's off to the side of the camera, and she hands the bracelets towards him, and there's almost a 3D effect where her arm sort of comes out towards the audience. It's a nice angle, and I appreciated it. So, there were some really good visual things that happened. There were some weird ones, but there were some good ones too. Maybe Stuart was still learning. I don't know. He didn't start too long before this. So, and for all I know, he's still directing. He's still acting. So anyway, we said we were going to hustle through this. So anyway, in the meantime, and then Wonder Woman gets put into the diner cell with the good Maggie and the good Hank. And they lock the door with a chain.
And no sandwiches or drinks or nothing.
No, not a thing. That's cruel and unusual. So Steve, who's gotten the message to come down to the diner, he gets there and he asks bad Maggie to call her bad fiance at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. And so in the meantime, Wotan comes up beside him and says, "Hey, here's some coffee on the house." And so Steve drinks the evil coffee. And then he gets bad Hank on the phone, who is in the process of stealing the plates, right? Like he's in his personal vault. This is where he keeps it under lock and key, I guess. Yeah. And in the meantime, George Bush is tied up in the background.
Yeah.
And so, he talks to Steve and he's like, "Oh yeah, I met your George Bush fellow, and he's great." And but he was waiting outside. He didn't come in with me. I guess, I just thought he was waiting outside. So goodbye. And so he hangs up, and then he does the evil, "I'm going to tell you my evil plan" thing to George Bush, and says, I'm going to blow you up, and I'm going to take these plates, and then they won't know what plates I stole and what I didn't. And then he turns around and George Bush kicks him in the back of the legs and he falls. And at first I thought, well, that is the most lame Secret Service move I've ever seen, because that's all he's able to do. He kicks him, the guy recovers, and then he's got nothing else. Like he's still lying there tied up. But what this does is it aggravates the loose filling that the spy has. So right? The spy, I forgot to mention, he's had this problem with a filling. And Wotan back in Berlin says, "You better get that taken care of. I don't want it compromising the mission." And, then they go have champagne. And then obviously he never took care of it, because one fall against a desk and suddenly it's a problem again. So right. He's loosened the guy's filling. So I guess for story-wise, that was the purpose of that really lame attack. So anyway, the bad Hank recovers and he's like, "I ought to kill you right now, but I'm going to let you just sit here and listen to this clock ticking before you blow up."
Listen to me whinging about my tooth.
Yes. So he goes outside and he joins, and Steve meets him outside, and Steve finds out about his filling, because he keeps wincing, and he's like, "Well, I've got a dentist right around the corner. Let's go take care of it," and he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it." And he's like, "No, seriously, I'm gonna, I don't know where my Secret Service guy went, but I'm going to be your shadow, and I want to take care of your tooth. So let's go."
Yeah, he's my friend, eh? Come on, come see my friend.
So, Bad Hank doesn't know what to say to him. So he's like, okay, let me just say bye to my fiance. So he runs into the diner, gives Wotan the plates, and says, I guess I got to go to this guy's dentist. And Wotan says, I told you to take care of that filling before. And so, he's like, just go. And so the guy goes off to Steve's dentist, and Wotan runs downstairs with Bad Maggie. And no, she stays upstairs. I'm sorry. And but he runs downstairs just to brag at Wonder Woman that he's got the plates and goodbye. Now, weirdly, at the beginning of the episode, they say Wotan is this super mysterious spy and nobody's ever seen his face, right? And everybody has seen his face in this episode.
Right.
And I don't know if we expect him to kill everybody, or, I mean, obviously he intends to kill Good Maggie, Good Hank, and Wonder Woman, and maybe Steve for good measure. But more people have seen his face. Like, if I were Bad Hank and Bad Maggie, I'd be worried, because once they've served their purpose, there's no reason for them to be around either. That's just food for thought. So Wonder Woman, in the meantime, Wonder Woman, who's obviously been strong enough to do this the whole time, decides now that Wotan's run off with the plates. Now she's going to spring into action. And I will say, she doesn't have her bracelets, so maybe she's afraid somebody's going to get shot and she won't be able to defend them, speaking specifically of Good Maggie and Good Hank, right? But, I mean, she could have done something before this.
She could have done something.
But, she waited to the right moment, I guess. And so when Jason, the guard, is not looking, she just takes the padlock and crushes it, right? And so now the chain is free, the door is, ready to open. And Jason decides he wants to play with these bracelets all of a sudden. I don't know why, but he starts trying to put the bracelets on, and she's, of course, as you say, with this very sweet voice, she's like, oh, well, you have to, those will fit. You just have to put them in the right, on the right place in your wrist,
Let me show you how to adjust them.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, she's using her feminine wiles for sure.
Right. And so he goes over there, of course, and she grabs his hand and pulls him through the cell bars, and kind of squeezes his wrist, and he drops the gun. And then she takes him and throws him against a brick wall with enough force, I think, that would probably kill somebody. Sometimes they're careful to couch some of this some of this superhero stuff, but she really throws him hard enough. Like, if he were an actual person hitting an actual brick wall with his head, he would have died. And I don't think Wonder Woman meant to kill Jason. He's got a lot of Scorsese movies to do. She can't kill him. So I assume that's supposed to be just to knock him out. So anyway, she tosses him. He's knocked out. And she tells Good Maggie and Good Hank to go to the War Department and tell Blankenship. And which, they should have been able to just call him, I think. Or maybe she could call him. I don't know. But anyway, but she's got business to take care of. In the meantime, over at the dentist, and this dentist, by the way, is played by Don Eitner, and he was on a MASH episode, believe it or not. He was in an episode called Bug Out. He's just credited as Captain, but I think I know who he was in the episode. Anyway, I digress. But yes, well, so Bug Out is a two-parter, right? And Radar, Hawkeye, and Hot Lips, well, she's Margaret by then, have to stay at the camp while everybody else bugs out because the Chinese are on the way. And so they're in this creepy, quiet camp all by themselves. And suddenly this convoy comes through, and And Hawkeye goes, this Jeep stops, and this guy, who I think is this captain, played by Don Eitner, says, "You guys shouldn't be here." And he's like, "Well, we got to take care of a patient. Where's the front?" And the captain says, "You're standing on it." It's kind of like a woo moment, like, whoa. Anyway, let's talk about Wonder Woman, because I think that's why we're here. Hey, you've got a kitty there.
It's another kitty.
That's a different kitty than I saw before.
I have lots of different kitties.
Wow. Our listeners can't see it, but it's one cute kitty.
This is my little orange kitty.
Yay.
That my father named Pumpkin.
Oh, nice.
I think I told you this story, didn't I? It was like not even a week before he passed away.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he saw this little orange kitty and said, "Where'd you get that pumpkin?"
Oh.
I know we just went in a wildly different turn, didn't we?
That's okay. That is absolutely fine.
I can tell that story without weeping now. It's been a year and a half. He's
That's good.
Just over a year and a half. But anyway.
Wonderful. Pumpkin. Bye, Pumpkin.
Pumpkin is now in the kitchen because Pumpkin thinks he's getting ready to get a treat.
Oh, okay.
He's not.
Well, if you have to go give him a treat, then please do.
No, they can wait. They're fine. They won't die.
Well, let's get back to MASH. I mean Wonder Woman. Okay. So
yeah.
So
Don Eitner.
Don Eitner. So anyway, this dentist says, "Hey, Steve, I don't know if I've been watching too many movies, but this filling I just took out of this guy is made of steel.
Steel.
And Nazis are the ones that make steel fillings, which I don't know if that's historically accurate. I mean, I
don't know. I wondered that too, and I was going to try to look that up if that's a thing.
I mean, it was because of rationing, because they didn't want to use gold or silver because that was needed elsewhere. So fillings were apparently made of steel. But
I don't know. I will ask. One of my brothers is a aficionado of World War II stuff. I think he would know that. I'm going to ask him. Unfortunately, I don't have that information for you for this podcast, but I'll find out.
Well, I'm curious to know. I listened to this Hardcore History podcast. Have you ever heard that? It's a great podcast.
I have not.
And this, there's a long series this guy does on World War I. And at least in World War I, it is true that the Germans were running out of everything.
Mm-hmm.
All their resources were being taken up by the war. And so that would not surprise me at all if they just made shit up to put in your mouth instead of using valuable metals that they needed elsewhere. But that's the thing. I mean, steel would be needed elsewhere too. I don't know. Find out for me, and we'll get back to our faithful listeners. Yeah. So
the billions of them.
What's that?
The billions.
The billions of listeners. Yes, absolutely. They're very quiet. And they don't talk to me. They don't send emails or anything.
They're intimidated by you.
That must be it. So Wonder Woman lures Bad Maggie down into the basement by throwing a pot against the door. And that works, believe it or not. And so when Bad Maggie comes down, Wonder Woman throws her in the cell with Jason and fixes the door so it won't open, right? And so she leaves. And almost as soon as she leaves, Steve shows up. He's come back with Bad Hank from the dentist. And, he's not letting on to Bad Hank that he suspects him now because of his steel filling. And he's just playing it cool. And he's like, let's go find Maggie. And in the meantime, there's a single customer in there who's been waiting for service. And of course, Maggie is downstairs incapacitated. And this lady is dressed up. I sort of recognize this, just watching it, but it confirmed in IMDb, if you believe that, that she was specifically made up to look like Rosie the Riveter, like those posters of Rosie the Riveter.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And she did. She looked just like her. And she just had this one little walk-on thing. And she's like, I'm leaving. because I'm not getting any service. And then she leaves. I don't know why she was there. Maybe it was a favor to this actor, that she got to do a one-line walk on or something. But anyway, so Steve convinces Bad Hank to go down to the basement, right? And Steve, being the clever guy he is, goes first. And so, of course, Hank pushes him down the stairs and just about knocks him out. And then he goes and frees Bad Maggie. But Steve recovers and starts fighting this guy. And, of course, Maggie has time to get a gun and puts it on Steve. And I don't know actually where she got that gun, because Wonder Woman, before she left, bent the last gun that was there.
Right.
And so maybe Bad Maggie had her own gun. I don't know. Or maybe Steve dropped it, or maybe Bad Hank had it. It's hard to say. I'm going to blame Stuart Margolin. Jeez, what's his name? Stuart Margolin. I must know somebody named Margolis. There's an acting coach named Margolis, I think. Anyway, Stuart Margolin. Right? Stuart Margolin. I blame him.
I'll never forget that now. I'll have that name cemented in my brain now. Stuart Margolin.
Anyway, where'd the extra gun come from, Tarantino? I don't know. All right. So now Bad Maggie's got the drop on Steve, so she throws him into the cell, and then the other three can get out of there, right? So they somehow relock the padlock that Wonder Woman destroyed, and he's locked in. Right. So they run.
Well, that's the beauty of Stuart Margolin, is that locks and guns are just randomly placed on the set.
They've got extra padlocks, extra guns. And but Steve, not to be outwitted, grabs a fork and picks a lock. So he's not far behind them. He frees himself immediately, and he's not far behind. So but in the meantime, Wotan and soon Bad Maggie and Bad Hank, along with Jason, are on the beach.
Who, by the way, have no German accents whatsoever.
Oh, well, if you recall, well, I don't know why Wotan doesn't, but if you recall, the one general said, "I've had them learning at my special American village." He has an American village.
But yet they still say Wotan and not Wotan.
Well, it's, I guess,
that's neither here nor there.
Proper respect for his German heritage. So Wonder Woman gets there. She lassos Bad Hank and Bad Maggie. Sorry, I just hesitated because where did Jason go? I don't recall.
Stuart Margolin. I don't know.
Stuart!
Answer our questions.
I'm sure I missed it, but I watched the thing twice, like in the last couple of days, and I don't remember what happened to Jason.
I don't remember either.
Somewhere between the diner and the beach, he's disappeared.
It's okay. I don't think our audience gives a shit.
Oh, now I've got to change the rating. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't matter. So she lassos the fiancés, the fake fiancés, right? And ties them up, leaves them on the beach. In the meantime, Wotan has gotten ahead, and he's in the water with his rubber raft. And she takes her tiara off, boomerangs it at the raft. Yeah, and pops that raft like a cheap balloon. And then it flies back to her, and she puts it back on her head. And and there's an actual sad, I don't know if it's a sad trombone or a sad trumpet in the soundtrack when his raft deflates. Like there's an actual sad tuba sound or something. I don't know. It's like a womp, womp, right in the middle of the soundtrack. Anyway, so Wotan's not going to make it to their, whatever submarine's waiting for him. So he has to drag himself back to shore, and Wonder Woman's got him. She takes the other end of the lasso, the longest lasso I've ever seen in my life,
right?
That's still tied to the other couple, and lassos him and drags him, onto shore. And he's like, well, you weren't quick enough to save Steve. And she's like, and her expression changes. And she's like, oh, what happened to Steve? And he goes, he's in Valhalla. I don't know that he gives the evil laugh, but he should have, because that would have been a nice touch. Laugh. So in the meantime, Steve has freed himself and he goes directly to George Bush, who's still tied up in the Bureau of Engraving and whatever, in the vault. And the bomb's going to go off. And Steve looks at the bomb. So it's like, 4 or 5 sticks of dynamite with a little cheap clock on it, right? But George Bush is tied up and he looks at Steve like, you're going to take care of this, right? And I swear to you, Steve has this expression like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to give it a shot. He seriously looks like, I think this will work. I don't know.
It depends on the writers.
Yeah, but like he's gonna first of all, they're in a vault, right? So he could grab George Bush, drag him outside, close the vault, let it blow up. And then nobody would be hurt, but they'd have, there'd be some collateral damage with the plates and everything. So, but he's gonna save the day by defusing this bomb that he clearly has no idea how to do, because he looks like he's worried, but it's like in a jovial way, like, I don't know if this will work, but here we go. And so he grabs one of the wires and yanks it out, and it works. They don't blow up. And so,
yay.
So he winds up outside. He takes his friend from the Secret Service, Mr. George W. Bush, and we're talking about George W., right?
I mean, that's to
not
me,
George
that's
H.W.
No, he looked like George W.
Okay. So and Wonder Woman just gets there in the nick of time to see Steve emerging from the building, and everything's okay. And she's like, "Oh, that's fantastic!" She came to rescue him, and there he is, having rescued himself. And and he's very proud of himself that he did it without her help, because he's constantly having to be rescued by her.
But did he?
I don't know. His behavior in the diner, I think, should be part of his report, and how he allowed himself to be kicked down the stairs because he went first. Anyway, so he's very proud of himself, and we have a nice little moment between them. And we get their traditional epilogue at the audience, where they kind of wrap things up. Did I say audience? At the office, at Steve's office, they usually have an epilogue, a last scene where they make some comments about, well, this was a fine adventure or whatever. So, but we get more good Etta Candy stuff, because she's like, Wonder Woman's so great. I wish I were her.
But I still want my $1.50. Damn it.
Where's my $1.50 in all this? And, and then Steve says, the government is taking the $2 bills out of circulation. Now,
yeah, I noticed that.
Why would they do that? Because
I don't know.
Like you say, it never happened. Now, I will say, I looked it up too, and what I did notice was that they were out of print from 66 to 76, just for 10 years, because they just didn't need to print more, but they were still in circulation, like you said, right?
Yeah.
They've always been in circulation, but for some reason, and I remember this when I was a kid, because I got one from my grandparents too. Maybe they gave me a couple of them. I don't know. They gave me a couple of $2 bills.
But they stopped because they were worried that you would become a stripper.
Exactly. It's like the same thing.
Wow, we're living parallel lives.
But there has been these urban legends about, people can't use them because they're used so infrequently that people think they're fake. And there's this old expression, which I don't know if it's really appropriate to say anymore, but people used to say queer is a $3 bill, right?
I've heard that.
And I've heard people say it queer is a $2 bill, as though $2 bills are fake. And so like there's this mass hysteria where people think $2 bills aren't real, and they've always been in circulation. And so I guess what my point is that in 76, when there was a resurgence of use because they started printing them again. If people believe that for some reason for a while they were not issued, or because they stopped printing them or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering why somebody would write this episode and have that statement in there that the government is going to stop issuing them.
Maybe that was the thought process at the time.
It's crazy.
I don't know.
It's crazy, Susan. It
is crazy, Stan.
It's lunacy. I mean, everything in this episode is supposed to be real or based on reality, including including the lasso
and the cuffs and the tiara and the
everything
egregious strength,
except this lie about $2 bills. How dare you, Steve? I blame Stuart, of course. All right, so anyway, so they're talking about Wonder Woman, right? And because Etta says she wants to be Wonder Woman, and Steve's like, hey man, there's only one Wonder Woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he says this weird thing. Wonder Woman has all the virtues of femininity with none of the vices. And I'm like, what are the vices of femininity that you are referring to, Stephen?
What an a-hole. I missed that somehow. I don't like that comment. What vices? Oh, Wonder Woman doesn't get a ticket when she gets pulled over because she just lashes her boobs. What are the vices of femininity? Come on,
Steve. Stephen Leonard Trevor. She uses his full name in this episode earlier.
All right, that's a whole other podcast that we can go on.
But let's not hate on Steve because Wonder Woman...
hating on Steve. We're ending this episode with Susan Sistare hating on Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to point that out. Because Wonder Woman tempers it. She says, you know what, Etta, we can't all be Wonder Woman, but we can just be the best women we can possibly be. That's something my mom said, or something like that. So, she says this wonderful thing, and it's true for everybody. You can only be the best person that you can possibly be. So, as usual, Wonder Woman, in her wisdom, has, taught everybody, including Steve, a lesson about virtues and vices.
Steve learned it. I don't know yet.
We'll find out in the next episode.
Okay.
So that's the episode. Of course, Wonder Woman gives her trademark smile as Diana. It's telling us there's only 10 minutes. I'm sorry.
I know.
So here's what we'll do. We'll wrap up the episode and then we'll come back with a new recording and we'll talk Susan Sistare. We'll talk.
No. Did you just say Sistare?
No, I did not. I don't have it in front of me. Listen, I've never used that name other than when you've told me this day and the other day when we were talking on The Real Guys. Sistare.
I think you just boo-booed and you're now covering it up.
I am totally. I'm scrambling for excuses.
But you know what? I love you so much and your hair. And I just want to run my fingers through your hair. I will forgive you. Just
like Stephen Leonard Trevor. So tell me again, though, how you say your name correctly.
Sistare.
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 Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sistare. All right.
It was originally Sistera. And that was really? My great-grandparents who moved here from Spain. And they wanted to sound a little more American. So they just switched the E and the A. And they became Sistare.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Now that I've got that straight, because, I just never listen. This is my problem. I don't listen. I want to say one more thing about the episode, and then we're going to talk about you, Susan Sistare, right? So there's a guy in the credits named Bob Harks, and I mean the credits on IMDb because he's uncredited on the show.
Okay.
And he's listed as pedestrian. I don't know who he is, but so I looked him up. He is an uncredited walk-on in every freaking show that ever existed.
Oh, wow.
And he's also got credits as stand-in and stunt double. So this is a guy like from Central Casting who just worked as an actor for the studio or whoever and was just in all these shows. And all he did was like walk on background stuff. In fact, of course, as you might guess that I would mention, he was on MASH. in their second episode ever, he was a colonel somewhere. And again, I don't know exactly where because he didn't have any lines, but he was in the background. But like he's been on, like one of his first jobs was Adam 12, and one of his last jobs was Forrest Gump. Like he's just been doing it forever. So
interesting.
Anyway, so there you have it.
I'll have to follow that guy's career.
The last of the $2 bills, although it's a lie because they weren't the last of the $2 bills. But in this Wonder Woman universe, they were. So I guess I don't have a clear idea how much, if at all, you watched the original Wonder Woman when you were growing up or whenever.
I will tell you.
Okay.
I was pretty young, but I do remember it well because I grew up with two older brothers who always beat the crap out of me. Very much a tomboy. I had no choice. I had no real female influence. I mean, my mother, but you know, she tried to get me to be girly and stuff, and it just wasn't happening. So, and a lot of the neighborhood kids, most of them were boys. So I had a lot of testosterone growing up around me.
Uh-huh.
But I also kind of resented it because
Right.
I was like, there's nothing on TV that's, for me. Although that's not true. Wonder Woman, I greatly admired her. I'm also a big Joan Jett fan because when Joan Jett made her appearance on the music scene, wow, I'd never seen anything like it. It was this like strong ass female chick, and I have my influences that are male that I love dearly. Keanu Reeves is one of them. Of course, Corey Feldman,
Right.
is one of my dudes.
Yeah.
I appreciate his background. He's coming to Spartanburg.
Yeah.
By the way. Yeah.
I know.
We're going to hang out.
Yeah. Talk about that. So talk about when you met him.
He's coming the day after my birthday. And I like to tell people that he did that on purpose. Maybe he did. I don't know, but I'd like to think that. Yeah, he's coming back, and he's a pretty good performer. I know people give him a hard time because I guess when you're an actor or a musician and then you flip-flop, you're gonna take some flack.
Yeah.
And he has. But he is a really good performer. He did all the songs from, not all, but a lot of the famous songs that he, from movies that he was in back in the day. And he was very good at it. He's plays guitar, he sings, his band is pretty good. It's a good time. I'll say that. And he was very nice to talk to. I hung out with him a little bit last December. And I like him. I respect him.
How did you meet him last December?
I bought a VIP ticket.
Oh, okay.
And then I gave him a copy of my book.
Oh, okay.
So
now, which book is this? Because you are a prolific author. Like you have a couple of books, right?
I have 5.
5.
And I gave him the second book that I wrote, which is called Cats, Boys, and Booze. And the subtitle is How Not to Find Love in a Really Small Town. Because Spartanburg is small, South Carolina. a decade ago when I wrote this, Spartanburg was not what it is now. It didn't have the number of restaurants and, cool places. And it used to be called, well, I actually called it this. I used to say it was Greenville's uglier twin.
Okay.
Because Greenville was like the place to go. But
Right.
now Greenville has kind of turned into a Charlotte Junior, and parking is awful. And, Spartanburg is still small enough where you can park anywhere downtown and go to lots of places.
Yeah.
And it's my hometown, and I've kind of gained an affinity for it more than I ever had before. And I think that's more to do with the fact that my parents have passed on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have a lot of family left. I have 2 brothers who are still in town. And so Spartanburg has kind of grown on me in the last few years. And so I invited Corey Feldman when I saw him and gave him a copy of my book. And I said, please, when you come to Spartanburg, you got to let me know and we can hang out and whatever. Unfortunately, I'm embarrassed to say this. I forgot my Instagram password. So I haven't been into Instagram. So maybe he has emailed me through Instagram. I don't know. I need to do that.
You should probably do that.
I am terrible with social media. I gotta say, I'm just awful at it.
Yeah.
But anyway, all that to say, I'm not being a sexist here. I have an ex-boyfriend who's still a very good friend of mine, and he likes to pick on me about being a man basher. I am not a man basher. I'm an asshole basher.
Okay.
Not a man basher, though.
Right.
I don't think I am. I have a number of men, male people that I really love and respect. And unfortunately, I've come across this a lot, that when a woman has so many female idols that we look up to, it's kind of seen as either we're a lesbian or a man basher or whatever. That's not the case. It's just because when you grow up and you're young and you don't see a lot of people who look like you, and this can apply to people of color as well. When you don't see a lot of people who look like you kind of get a little depressed.
Yeah.
And you crave that. And so for that strong woman persona, to watch that as a kid, I can't even tell you what that did for me. That really sparked a lot of who I am. And I ended up, doing things like going in the military and moving overseas and skydiving and bodybuilding and doing some badass woman stuff. And I owe a lot of that to my early influences of these powerhouse women.
Yeah.
So there's my spiel about Wonder Woman and Linda Carter.
Yeah.
And also, she's freaking beautiful. I mean,
yeah.
I don't want to sexualize her because so many people do, and that's not what Wonder Woman is about. But if we're going to speak about that, I love the fact that she actually has a female figure that is normal and not super skinny.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
God, I just think she's amazing.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
is that what you were looking for?
That is exactly what I was looking for. Yes. That's wonderful. And now, like, so you've talked a little bit about this. So you are possibly moving towards getting back into bodybuilding.
I am doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether I do the show or not next year, I don't know. But
gotcha.
I'm doing it. I'm getting back into the mindset of it because I'm about to be 50.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, one thing that is very important to me is being a good influence on other women, especially younger women.
Mm-hmm.
And I want them to see someone like me and say, okay, I can do that too.
Yeah. All right. So, so you are not a fan of social media necessarily, but if people want to get them more Susan, whether it's like learning about anything that you've done, including maybe your books, where would they look online for that?
Susan A. Sistare, Sistare.
Sistar.
I have a Facebook page. I'm embarrassed to admit I'm not that active on it, but I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, yeah, that's the way things are going. I'm just not very, I'm kind of an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I don't do a lot of social media. I need to. So thank you, Stan, for getting me out there and making me do that.
Yes.
I also
pleasure.
have a Gmail account, susanassistar@gmail.com. People can email me, which sometimes they do.
Uh-huh.
I got an email not too long ago, about 2 weeks ago, from a guy. It's funny, I get more emails from guys than women.
Yeah.
I don't get that, but I do. And he read one of my books and said, this is fantastic. And I want to have a conversation with you sometime. And it made me giddy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Susan. It was great to talk to you.
It's my pleasure, Stan. You know, I always love supporting your endeavors and doing things with you.
Well, thank you. All right.
Social media wise.
Yes. And we'll probably have a beer soon.
Yes. Guess where I'm going now?
I don't know. Where? The Cyclops Cidery and Brewery.
Nope. I am going to Duncan Park in Spartanburg, South Carolina to go to the American Legion baseball game.
Nice. Very
with
cool.
My friend Bob. You've probably seen him because you're on Facebook with me.
Yeah.
Who is about to turn 98. And
awesome.
He's there waiting for me now. So I'm going to go hang out with him at the baseball game.
Awesome. Well, good luck. Have fun.
Thank you very much. Let me know when you want to have a beer.
All right. Absolutely.
Love ya.
All right. Love you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dan. Bye.
My interview with Susan was recorded back in July, and you heard that she was going to a baseball game with her friend Bob. Susan was active with the veterans community and had become great friends with Bob, who unfortunately passed away a few weeks after we recorded. Now, I asked Susan if she wanted me to edit that last part out where she talked about going to the game with him, but she thought it was important to remember Bob. He was 97 and a World War II vet who served in the Navy at Pearl Harbor. Susan had posted quite a few pictures of her and Bob at baseball, at the VFW luau. I know he appreciated her friendship, and so do I. Susan is quite the Wonder Woman. Teacher, actor, bodybuilder, veteran, and author. I'll put her author page in the show notes. I definitely recommend her books. And listen, if you want to have as much fun as I hope she had as a guest on this show, if you are a Wonder Woman cosplayer, or like Susan, if you're simply a Wonder Woman in your own way, I would love to talk to you. Send me an email. You can find my email link as well as my social media links, including my new TikTok, thanks to my friend Wanda. All that stuff is on WonderWomanWednesdays.com. I've got links to all my favorite podcasts like Bookem Dano, Eventually Supertrain, Made for TV Mayhem, and also the Real Guys Facebook page, where I do a weekly live Facebook video with my buddy Jack. We talk movies, we drink beer, and sometimes interesting folks stop by, like Susan. I absolutely appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a wonderful time this holiday season or whenever you might be listening to this podcast. Life can be beautiful, and we are in this together, you guys, so treat each other and yourselves with a little extra care. Like the llama says, be kind whenever possible. It is always possible.